Well, hey, welcome to a Slice of Life, episode 3, season 2. Just excited to again be here. I've got a special guest with me today, Julia. Hi.
Hello.
We met. Man, it's been a couple years ago. I was trying to remember. Was it Amber's wedding bridal shower?
Oh, I think it was the bridal shower. No, maybe I came a few times before that, but
Are you sure?
I think I started. I think she invited me to come. Was it when she got baptized? Yeah, because she got
Yeah.
baptized before she got married.
Okay, but maybe that was before me
No.
because I don't remember baptizing Amber. If I did, Amber, I'm sorry.
Okay, he definitely
Right?
did. She got rebaptized. I remember.
Was it
But,
me?
yeah, it was.
Are you sure it was me? Wow. Okay, I'm sorry, Amber. You got to get rebaptized. So she's like,
That's okay.
no.
Yeah,
We have one this Sunday. You can come.
oh yeah, I guess that could work. But
Yeah.
I know it was sometime around there.
Okay.
I had started coming. Amber had invited me, and I came. And
Yeah. I just remember the first time I remember seeing you was actually in the fellowship hall because I remember like looking and going, Amber knows an actress. So I
so
think
honored.
I think she looks like the lady's name is Danica. I don't know her last name, but from Wonder Years. For those of you that are my age,
I was gonna say.
I remember the Wonder Years with Fred Savage, and it's kind of an old thing. And then I think she's in a lot of Hallmark movies now.
Oh, okay. I like Hallmark.
So, okay, well then there's the
Maybe
door.
I've seen
You can
her.
leave. So, I am not a Hallmark fan.
Oh,
Um,
not. They have Christmas in July. Like,
yeah,
nothing
well,
better than that.
yeah, but every movie is exactly the same.
It's just
It's
it's a
exactly,
growing.
yeah.
Romance.
It's definitely not a me thing. So, but I remember seeing you and go, oh my word, and then we talked, and I'm like,
Yes,
okay,
that was the bridal.
it was, see, yeah, that's the first time I remember like that moment, just because I thought, wow, an actress, I'm gonna get her autograph, and I loved the Wonder Years growing up.
Like, I am so honored here. I look like an actress now.
It's just been fun. So that was kind of our first time meeting, and then just throughout over the last couple of years, just a chance to get to know you, know your husband,
Yes.
Hollis, and what an incredible concrete guy. So he's been a blessing to me and helping out in a lot of ways. Great guy, and then your son as well. And I know you're all about your son.
I am.
Like you, social media, it's just like in fact, I think you just posted my son's gorgeous, and like,
I did.
like
It was like
come
not
on,
to toot my own horn, but my hun is too handsome.
yeah,
Oh yeah. But
yeah,
then you saw Gina commenting, and she was like, "Oh yeah, he is."
oh yeah,
See,
okay,
ladies at church think so too. They're just
well,
all in my head.
yeah, that's like well, yeah, okay, I'll say it anyways. So babies, I think babies are ugly. I
Um,
absolutely think, and that's probably the number one lie that most adults do are like, oh, your baby's so cute when it
yeah.
looks like an alien.
I will tell you, I've
Yeah,
said some babies are cute that
yeah,
are that.
yeah, you lied, yeah,
But even my son, like, I always thought that he was like the cutest. Like when he was
yeah,
born, like I remember the doctors were like, "He's adorable," and I was like staring at him because I was in shock
yeah.
because he literally looked just like my husband. So
Oh,
like
okay,
I like when he came out, I was like,
yeah,
"Wow, I just birthed my husband." Like that is weird. Like right? So
yeah,
I'm like staring at him, and I'm like, "Yeah, I mean he's cute," but now when I look back at pictures, I'm like, "You
yeah.
are not that cute."
Is
I
it
mean,
maybe
you're cute.
mommy eyes? Is that what it
Yeah, it
is?
could be
Like,
because I've always heard like when I was pregnant with my son, I remember telling my mom like, "Oh my gosh, what if he's ugly?" And she was like, "You're not gonna think that. It's your kid, like right? Like everyone thinks that their kids are beautiful, like good looking." I'm like, okay. So I think it's a mommy thing. Like
yeah,
I think absolutely that we think our kids are probably the cutest things ever,
right,
and
right.
other
So
people's kids. Like we're biased,
bunch of liars. That's all I'm hearing. That's all I'm hearing. I'm gonna move this
but
mic
oh,
just a
you're
little
okay.
closer to you. I see that.
Oh, there we go.
Is that a little
That
bit
feel
better?
better.
So I want to make sure that
Okay.
everybody can hear you. So
Oh, okay.
hey, and so the reason I brought her on is that I think one of the things that we as Christians do is we do a disservice to the unchurched. And what I mean by unchurched, if you're listening, it's just those that weren't raised in church, that didn't have that kind of that formation, um, going through like children's church and
Yes.
learning all the stories, like David and Goliath and Noah's Ark and, Joseph and his multicolored coat and some of these things
I feel like you're already lost
you're like,
me.
what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know, but I think so often we Christians, and I'm talking about those of us that were raised in church, we know these stories. We've heard them our whole life. We
Mhm.
like every Sunday we went to VBS, which is like a vacation Bible school
Okay.
during the summer, and for 4 or 5 days we're learning these stories. We go to Wednesday nights or Sunday nights or whenever
Yeah.
and the kid stuff. And so you kind of raise through it, and we go through what they call sword drills. And sword drill is you take your Bible and somebody says a scripture, and who can
Mhm.
get to it fastest. And so
Oh,
we're
look at that.
we're taught all those
Uh-huh.
things. In fact, at church a couple months ago, we had a Christmas celebration, and we pitted the adults and the kids against each other, and we would say a letter, and we say the
Mhm.
letter A, and they'd have to come up with a Bible book that started with the letter A that hadn't been used already,
Oh,
you
gotcha.
know.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, the kids won, by the way. So
That sounds impressive.
I think I was more of a high school student, but still, we're taught all that.
Yeah.
But then I say something like Habakkuk to you,
Mhm.
and
Yeah, no.
anything like
No.
you're probably like, that's something in the Bible,
You know,
right? Because you're saying it. We're talking about the
yeah,
Bible.
yeah. I will say, like, even, I started going to Thursday nights, which is like the women's group, and
Yeah.
we started reading this book, and people are like taking all this stuff from this book, right? Like we talk about it at, we get together on Thursday, talk about our readings. And I looked at Amber and I was like, wow. Like I would have never taken that from this book because I'm so focused on the names
Yeah.
and like the little songs that the chief shepherd sings, and I'm like, I can't even pronounce it, let alone take in like what these
Yeah.
people are taking
Yeah.
in from the book. So yes, that trips me up sometimes. Even like I've tried to do Bible studies, right? Like I get
Yeah.
these cute little books that it's like, okay, we're gonna read the Bible in 365 days and do these little notes and things like that. And I'm like, I don't even understand like what
Yeah.
I'm reading. Like it's hard to even get past the way they write it
Yep.
to
Yeah.
begin to take in information,
Right.
right?
Well,
So
I think to me, it's almost like a language barrier
yeah,
because we've been taught, and it would be like, well, like Portuguese. So your husband's
yes,
from Brazil,
yep,
right, and speaks Portuguese, and so you've got that language barrier, and obviously you've worked on it, and you know some,
yes,
mostly so you can kind of eavesdrop and to know what other people are saying as
that's
family gets together. I know how it is. I end up buying these headphones because I do a lot of missions work and like go to Romania.
yeah.
So now I have these translating headphones.
I
You know,
remember you telling Amber about that, and I was like, I need to buy those for my dad because he saw
yeah,
that these came out,
yeah,
and my dad is just he talks to everybody. Like, I mean,
yeah,
he'll come to a party that we have or like a get together, and no one understands what he's saying, but he talks. Like, he
yeah,
will have a whole conversation with you, and I'm like, he needs these because he'll be like, Hollis was saying something. I don't know what he was saying. Like, I
yeah.
want to know, and I'm like,
Right
yeah, he
there,
needs some
there you go. So
an investment there for
we have those. Why? Because again, we don't understand the language. There's a barrier there, and I think Christianity, what some will call Christianese,
that. Mhm.
it's a language all of our own. Because again, we were raised in that, and that book that you're talking about, I think Heinz Feet, something
Yes.
like that, right? An allegory, and it's for those I think um, outside the church. Again, they're not going to get it
Yeah.
because what it's doing is it's painting this incredible picture for those of us inside the church of the stories in the Bible.
Gotcha.
And so as we're reading it, that we're like, there's a correlation. We're like, oh, I get this,
Yes.
right? Because I know the stories already, and I can see, oh, the good shepherd, is this, and the grace and mercy is this, and again, this language, and then those that are outside that, it's like,
Yeah.
what is this?
Yeah.
You know,
I've been there.
we can read it and go, I know the next part of the story already. I'm ahead of
Yeah.
it because I know the end of the story because I read the Bible, which it's pulled from,
Gotcha.
right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And what's interesting is, to me, when we think of this Christianese, one of the things that C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. Have you heard those names
No.
before? Lord of the Rings.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
the writer of Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien. The Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe, the
Mhm.
Chronicles of Narnia. Do you
I've
know
heard of them. I
those a little
just
bit, right?
not
C.S.
up my
Lewis,
alley yet.
right? Fantasy, the whole thing.
Yeah.
What these two gentlemen were actually friends,
Mhm.
right? And writers, prolific writers, and they both came to Christianity. I think in college time
Oh
frame.
wow. Okay.
Started a group of guys, and one of the
Mhm.
things that they struggled with is the same conversation you and I are having right now. Is like, how do we tell, or how do we explain Christianity to those that don't know anything about Christianity? And so they wrote books,
Hmm.
the Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
The Hobbit. Those are
I did not know
Christian
that.
written, um, telling the story of good versus evil, telling the story of Jesus Christ. Chronicles of Narnia,
I did not know
the
that.
same thing.
Huh.
Chronicles of Narnia, I believe there's 7 books, if I'm right,
Yeah.
6 or 7 books. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is the biggest of them, most known. And the movie came out. Actually, 2 more came out.
Oh, wow.
That they just didn't do as well in
Okay.
the box office because people didn't really know about them. But the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is such an easy one to look at because you have Aslan, who's the lion.
Okay.
And the lion is actually Jesus' representation. So what they looked at and they said, okay, how do we tell the story of Jesus in a way that anybody can get?
Yeah.
you know and it's not so much where you've got to know the story of Jesus to understand the story of the Lion, the Witch, and Wardrobe, or the Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings. you know and so they worked on that, and it's been incredible as you kind of read through it and see how impactful those stories were. But they use language that everybody
Yeah.
understands, not just Christians, right?
Now I'm like, I might have to look into
Now
those
you have
books
to watch
because
them.
now I'm interested because I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I would say, like, for those of you that maybe are interested to speak, watch The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Okay.
That's probably, they did such a great job of that. And if you know anything about Jesus, death, resurrection,
Yeah.
it's right there. You're going to see it. It's
Huh.
it's right there. Lord of the Rings, the movies did not, I think, portray the the Christology, or the story of Christ as
Mhm.
well in the movies, right? As the books did. But again, I think you can kind of begin to see the battle of good and evil, and
Gotcha.
and kind of what's going on in those worlds. And I think, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about really, is this, how do we as a church do a better job with those
Ooh.
that don't know the stories, right?
I'm like, that's a tough question,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
I
that's why I'm
mean,
asking it. And I'm gonna
I,
take a drink so you can answer.
I'm like, I gotta
Fix
come up with
us,
an answer.
fix us.
I you know, I that's a tough question. I will kind of just go, I guess. I was thinking about this on my way here, right? Like, what do I want to know, right? Like,
Yeah,
what do I want to ask?
right.
How can I help? But I feel like Christianity, to those who don't know, I feel like it feels like almost like a bunch of rules, right?
Yeah,
Like I feel like, because I am like I'm so interested. I want to know more. It's
yeah,
like I want to take that step, but I feel like I have this like I don't like a rule book, right? Like,
yeah,
I've heard people say before, like, oh my gosh, I don't listen to this music, I don't, read this book, I don't watch this movie, I don't do this, I don't do that. And I'm like, I remember I even told my husband not that long ago, like, oh my gosh, like I'm doing these things, but like, am I am I able to follow all these rules? Like I couldn't
right.
imagine like sitting down and being like, well, I'm not gonna watch my Grace Anatomy anymore because,
Yeah,
it doesn't follow
yeah.
these rules that like
Well, you shouldn't, because it's horrible anyways.
I think you're gonna lose
I'm
some followers just for
I'm
saying
I'm
that.
gonna
I mean,
get my wife, my daughter, they're not gonna watch either.
oh my
Um,
heart, Grace Anatomy is great,
oh,
but
it's horrid, horrid. Oh my word.
I started that show.
Although, want to talk about actors, at one point they started calling me Pastor Stud Muffin. What's the doctor,
I know it.
right? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like at some
Yes,
point,
yeah.
we had, and this is, a decade ago, obviously, because I'm a little grayer than I was
That's okay.
then. And I came to a church for the first time as their pastor,
Uh-huh.
and there was a lot of 20-year-olds at
Oh,
that
okay.
church, you know,
Yeah.
they invited one of the ladies had invited her friends, and they're like, "Ooh, I'm going there because that's where Pastor
I
whatever
think they called
was
it what was it, Mick? Oh.
McDreamy."
Yes,
Pastor
that's
McDreamy.
what
They
was
started calling me
oh,
Pastor
yeah,
McDreamy. I'm
that's
like, oh,
hilarious.
that's crazy. But anyways, right. So yeah, there's a list of rules
Yes.
and
So I feel like Amber does a great job of this with me. Like I just
yeah,
feel like having more of that, like maybe like one-on-one time, that small group time. Like I think
yeah,
that the Wednesday nights that you guys do here, where like you kind of talk about more in depth the things that you're gonna preach about on Sunday, and people have that chance to kind of ask questions and kind of
yeah,
dive deeper into the Word. I wish that and I know it's hard because like you can't just take 2 hours out of your day every day
yeah,
to meet with someone and talk to them about, the things that they don't know or the things that they're
yeah.
wondering. But I think, being able to like have someone to kind of lean on to ask those questions and those things
Right.
that you don't know is extremely helpful, right?
Yeah,
Like, for me, I talk about Amber. Of course, Amber tells me she doesn't know anything, right? Like I'll
yeah,
ask her stuff and she's like, I don't know, or but like to me, she knows everything, right?
yeah,
Like we
yeah.
all
Because
have
she was raised in
yes,
church,
yeah.
right? So she
So
has some sort of foundation.
yeah, she does.
Yeah,
Where like with me, I'm like sometimes you'll say stuff, and I look at like her or I look
yeah,
at Troy, and I'm like, what is he saying? And they're like, and then they kind of explain that to me.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I think just maybe having the opportunity where like us
Right.
non-Christians could reach out to someone and kind of talk to them
Yeah,
about those things that we don't know or those questions that we want to have
yeah.
answered. Like me, I have Amber, or like if I catch you, I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
let's talk. Like I don't get this,
Which are some of my funnest conversations.
You always say that, but I
And
don't.
I
Like
enjoy
why?
those. But yeah, I'll tell you. So I know I'm a little different. I think from a lot of lead pastors in this is like when I look at my day, my role,
Yeah.
um, it's these one-on-one conversations that I live for.
Oh, really?
You
Okay.
know, I used to really my last church when I was in Chicago, I'd meet with people at Dunkin' Donuts, right?
Ooh,
Every
Duncan. Yeah.
Tuesday,
Okay.
and they would just come in and normally it was like a group of two or three guys,
Yeah.
maybe four, and it was an open call. Basically, he said, "Hey, if you want to discuss the sermon,
Yeah.
you want to discuss anything,
Yeah.
right? Biblical, just come and show up."
Oh, I love that.
And
Yeah.
that was such a fun time for me, because most of the people that came were people like you
Yeah.
that had never done Christianity, didn't know anything about it. I think I shared one of the stories with you, like one of the guys had a long story. Basically, his sister was going to church,
Okay.
and she came in one day and said, "Hey, my brother's in a coma, and we don't know what's going to happen."
Yeah.
And so we began to pray, and he actually he died, like it was a
Mhm.
Sunday morning. He died right before that moment,
Oh, wow.
when she called back in. They were able to resuscitate him, but by the afternoon, it was like just to me it was a miracle.
Yeah.
It was like she comes in, says, "Hey, my brother's in a coma. They're not sure if he's going to make it." We start to pray, and they've resuscitated him at this point, and then by the next day he's out of the hospital. Crazy, right? And
Like there's
so,
no other explanation for
right,
that but
yeah,
God,
yeah.
right? Like
There's something there,
yeah, that's
there's something
crazy.
there.
Yeah.
The timing was just perfect. So it's
Yeah.
either it was a great coincidence or God moved. So he ends up, because that's what he does. He ends up getting out of the hospital on Monday,
Mhm.
and then by next Sunday he's at church, and he's like,
Wow.
I don't. He goes, I don't know anything,
Yeah.
Pastor. All I know is that on Sunday I died, and then here I am on
Yeah.
a Monday I'm out of the hospital,
Yeah, that's amazing.
out of a coma,
Yeah.
right? The whole thing. So, great conversation with him. This guy was like a carny. I mean,
Oh,
he moved
yes.
to Canada.
Okay.
I think I shared
Yeah.
that with you.
Okay,
Moved
I
to
did
Canada,
see
was a
that.
carny. We were at Duncan at one point, probably been a couple weeks.
Mhm.
And he's like, man, that effing Jesus was awesome, except for he didn't say effing. He actually used it,
Yeah.
the whole way. And there's a couple other guys there that were Christian, and
Mhm.
they were super offended, and I was all excited, like, yeah, you're getting
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Um, but I think those conversations are important to
Yes.
your point.
I
And I had that standing open time for anyone that would come,
Mhm.
and discuss. And um, for me as a pastor, I love those ones because I get to talk about what I'm super passionate about,
Yeah.
you know. But the other part of it is just to see the growth and the ability. And one of the things I've said to you multiple times, I don't know, I think she doesn't believe me. I'm going to say it one more time. You have the greatest questions on Wednesday
He
nights.
always says this.
But it's true because I think too often, and we talk about like you said kind of like Amber. Well, I don't know anything, and to you, you're like she knows everything,
Everything. Yeah.
right? But I think for a lot of us that have a foundation,
Mhm.
the foundation is actually fairly weak because we've just accepted everything at face
Gotcha.
value,
Okay.
right? Joseph in the coat of many colors. I know you don't know the story, but this. Okay, we just accept that at face value. He had a
Yeah.
coat of multicolors.
And you don't
You
kind of
know,
dive it
I
down.
don't know anything else about the story other than this guy had a coat of many colors,
Gotcha.
right? We don't know why he had a coat of many colors. We don't know what that meant. Maybe watch the play
Yeah.
Joseph and the Dream Coat if you've ever seen
Okay.
right heard of that before. It's a
I
big
haven't, but
Broadway
I'll look
play,
into
right?
it. Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of the basis, but we've never dove a little bit deeper to say, well, what's the significance of the coat?
Gotcha.
What did that mean? Why? So yeah, we have a sort of a foundation, but it's not very strong. And the questions that you ask so often are those wrestling questions.
Yeah.
One of the things that was really interesting years ago, it's probably been about 15 years ago, they came out with a report about kids that graduated high school and went into college. And they were looking at Christian kids that were raised in a Christian home and
Mhm.
how many of them walked away from Christianity. And what they found is that those that walked away, three quarters, 75% of all of them
Wow.
walked away. The difference between the three quarters and the one quarter, the 25%, was the 25% had wrestled with Christianity, meaning that they had begun to ask the tough questions,
Yeah.
or at least ask any questions, and they were able to then articulate what it meant to be saved, where the other ones, the 75%, said things like you just said, it's a list of rules.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can live up to the list of rules. And the other 25% never even talked about the rules, never talked about the things that they couldn't do
Gotcha. Yeah.
because it wasn't even part of their thought process, if that makes
Yeah.
any
That does
sense.
make sense.
But they wrestled with it. And your questions on Wednesday are so insightful because you're wrestling with it.
Yeah.
You're not just like, okay, I'm just going to take this as face value, but to be able to I think to dive a little bit deeper into those questions.
Yeah. I feel like that's just kind of who I am, right? Like I'm a person where like if I don't fully understand something, like I don't get it, right? Like I'm not a person who can like sit there and write it 100 times over and over again and be like, all
Yeah.
right, I got it. It's instilled in
Yeah.
my head. I'm gonna live by that. That's, I guess, hard for me, right?
Yeah.
Like I want to really, and I guess the big thing is now, like I'm a mom, so like
Yeah.
I think that now it's like I'm not just living for me, right? Like I'm living for this
Gotcha.
little boy, like
Yeah.
and I want to give him that foundation. I want him to understand these things,
Yeah.
like I want to be able to answer his questions when he
Yeah.
gets big. But like I'm also a person where it's like, you got to practice what you preach. Like if I'm
Yeah.
going to say it, I'm going to do it. I stand by my word. That's just kind of who I am. So for me it's like if I'm really going to say like, all right, I'm going to be a Christian, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
going to get saved, I'm going to do all these things. Well, I have to
Yeah.
understand it,
Yeah.
right? Like I can't just because I don't wanna be that person, right? Like, I think I spoke to your wife about this once. Like, I was here on a Wednesday night and, social media, right? It's right in our faces all
Yeah.
the time.
All the time.
And
Yeah.
there is a woman that I follow, and her husband is pastor, okay? So she from the comments and things that people say to her, it seems that she is not living up to her of being a pastor's wife, right? Like
Okay.
the way she dresses.
Yeah.
the things that she does. It's like people are in the comments like, I cannot believe you're a pastor's wife. Like,
Yeah.
where does he even preach at?
Yeah.
Like, why is
Yeah.
this okay? And I remember saying to your wife once, like, some of the stuff that she wears or she did, I'm like, oh, she's cool. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I could see myself doing that, right? But is she really doing the right thing? So like I feel like I then became to question, like, does this woman fully
Yeah.
understand,
Yeah.
like the platform that she's on, right? Like,
Right.
like what she's supposed to be living up to, what she's supposed to be teaching other women as
Yeah.
a pastor's wife, right? So like I think that's another thing that kind of got my mind thinking, like, I want to know what you really can do, what you really can't do.
Yeah.
What is Christianity, right? Like the question we
That'd be
get.
interesting if there was like a true list. So
Right, like, because there isn't, right?
right.
Like,
So like in the Old Testament, there's 616 rules.
oh wow,
The
wow,
laws.
that
You
is a
know,
lot.
we're like 10 commandments. Everyone knows
Yeah.
the 10 commandments. No, 616.
Wow. Okay.
These rabbinical laws, these laws that the Jewish people had to
Mhm.
follow. Things like not eating shellfish,
Okay. Yeah.
those nut pork, so some of the dietary restrictions, how they deal with dead people, how they deal with just life in
Yeah.
general, not mixing different fabrics together,
Oh, wow.
just very, very specific,
Yeah.
very detailed. This is how you live. And
Yeah.
it's kind of, I'm weird. I'll just admit it. I love the study of those because they all had a purpose behind them.
Got
Like the interweaving weaving of different fabrics
Mm-hmm.
was actually a cult practice of some of the surrounding communities
Okay.
around them, right? And so God was like, through Moses, was, hey, you're not like everyone else, so don't do those cult practices, those
Yeah.
idol worship practice,
Mm-hmm.
And so then it makes complete sense. Before you're like, well, why can't I, put cotton and spandex together? I don't know if you ever do. I'm not a seamstress, so I don't understand that world. But when you realize, well, there's a purpose behind
Yeah.
it. But yeah, so you got these 616 rules in the Old Testament, and then Jesus comes and he says, I didn't come to abolish the law, but I've come to fulfill it.
Okay.
And that idea of fulfillment is and not abolishing. What he's saying is that the reason you practice the 616 is to be holy. And the
Okay.
idea of holy is well, let me explain it this way. McDonald's.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Everybody knows McDonald's.
Yes.
I'm going to go to
You and me.
McDonald's, right? I'm going to go to McDonald's for a hamburger,
Okay.
fries, for an ice cream if their ice cream maker's working that day, right? That's what I'm going to go for.
Yeah.
I don't go to McDonald's for a steak,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Maybe a breakfast burrito, but I don't go I don't expect them to be Taco Bell. I don't expect them to be any of these other it's not gonna be a burger like a Red Robin.
Yeah.
Yum, right? It's not any of those. So we could label McDonald's as holy. They
Mhm.
are who they are, and it's only when they mess up and they go away from who they are that things are weird. Like,
Gotcha.
sometimes they add new things that
Yeah.
aren't a McDonald's and you're like, oh, that's just gross.
Yeah.
Although, can I make a comment? I'm really frustrated.
Uh-oh.
I love Shamrock Shakes.
Oh, see, I never
Right?
even tried one. I don't.
And don't worry about them because they're horrible now. So McDonald's, get your act together. I don't know what you've done, but you've taken out
Oh, no.
I just had one the other day and I'm done. You guys have been cut off. The only reason I ever go to McDonald's once a year is now going for a Shamrock Shake, and now they've lost me. So you guys are dead to me.
Oh, that's so sad.
So, but anyways, but does that make sense? So they're holy.
Yeah.
And so what God desires for his people to be is holy. We are who we are.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Right. And so when Jesus said, hey, I come not to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law, he said, so you followed all these rules to set yourself apart from every other nation. Remember the interwoven the clothes.
Yes.
That's why they did it. So when people looked at them, they're like, oh, you're not like the Babylonians or the Egyptians, or
Yeah.
right. You are Israelites. I know by looking at you. I know by how you act and what you do. Okay. And so Jesus comes, says, I've not come to abolish, but to fulfill. What he's saying at that point is that it's not the law any longer that you've got to follow the 616 rules, but it's now a heart thing. It's about who you are,
Yeah.
and so those rules never could really make you truly a child of God. Just because you followed rules doesn't mean that you're a Christian,
Okay.
right? Because I know people that follow rules all the time, and there's no love in them at all,
Gotcha.
right? Which is
Yeah.
the earmark of Christianity, um, is the love of God and the love of neighbor. I mean,
Okay.
that is the earmark. That's what we should be, and
I'm like, I got that part. I
we've
can
done a
do that.
bad job of it, I think, as
Yeah.
Christians, right? And so because what we look at is like what makes me holy or what makes me a Christian are the rules, the things I follow.
Yes.
You
And that's
know,
how I kind of feel like I see Christianity, right? And I
yes,
feel like a lot of, I can't
but
even
that's
say
not your fault.
everyone's.
That's
Yeah.
our fault.
I mean, like, you do. I mean, I feel like you come in and it's kind of like, okay, you don't know anything. You
Yeah,
don't dress the right way. You don't look the right way. You don't speak properly. All of these things. And it's kind of like, so like when you come in, it's almost like, oh my gosh, everyone gonna judge me? Like, like when I came to church on Sunday, my pants that I wanted to wear, they were wet in the dryer. And I was like,
yeah,
hey, I have these pants that have some holes in it. And what do? Do I
yeah,
wear them? My husband's like, you're fine. Go to church, right? And I came, the first thing I did was like, look, like read the room, right? Like, is
yeah,
anybody looking at me? Did anyone notice that? And I'm like, Amber, I wore holes in my jeans to
yeah,
church. And she's like,
yeah,
it's okay. Like,
yeah,
I think that we as non Christians put this thought in our head that, like,
yeah,
we're not looking like everyone else, we're
yeah,
not speaking like everyone else, that we're not doing it right,
yeah,
or like
yeah,
we are. And it's not that we couldn't get there, but I just feel like there's just that misconception of, oh my gosh, I'm not doing all of these things that all of these Christians
yeah,
do, and I don't know the word. Like, how how can I want to do this, right? Like,
yeah.
how will I learn to do it, right? So it's kind of, I feel like that is a thing that scares people, right?
Well, and unfortunately, rightfully so,
Yeah.
because we as Christians have been very judgmental. I have story upon story of even as a lead pastor of individuals in my church that
Mhm.
have judged people as they've walked in. And it just breaks my heart
Yeah.
because again, it's not our dress, it's not our language, it's love that defines us. In fact, Jesus at one point says, "They'll know you by your love for one another." That, like, he didn't say anything else. He said, They're not going to know you because of the Bible you read or
Yeah.
the songs you sing or your dress. They'll know by the love that they're going to see something so incredible in you.
Mhm.
And yet, what do we have in our world today? People know us as hypocrites. People know us as judgmental.
Yeah.
They know us about everything else. And I tell you, as me as a pastor, there is nothing greater to me than those that come in and is really the earmark of what I'd love is to see more and more unchurched coming in and not knowing the songs, not knowing the dress code, not
Yeah.
knowing the things because they're going to wrestle. They're
Yes.
going to wrestle with the faith, and I bring there's such a big energy. I remember the church. I was first associate pastor at small groups assimilation, which is like assimilation is like how do we help people that have never come to our church
Oh,
become
okay.
part of our church, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so we had a statement at that church, and it's it's easier to raise or it's easier to tame a wild horse than it is to raise one from the dead,
Yes. Okay.
right? And that concept of like you're that wild horse, and I don't want to tame you in the said, but I do want to help you grow.
Yeah.
But then you've got people in the church that are dead
Yeah.
and they're unwilling to change, they're unwilling to grow, they're unwilling to move on.
Yeah.
And so I think, when we for those unchurched as you're going into church, yes, you'll probably get judged. But any good pastor, any good leadership, that's not their heart.
Yeah.
If you ever come to LCAE and you're judged, that's not my heart.
Yeah.
I mean, I had one guy at one point. He was eating chicken in the back pew of the church,
I mean,
right?
he's
And
hungry.
he enjoyed it too. And I remember guys were like, "Hey, we got to get rid of this guy." I'm like, "No, He's hearing the word. You know,
Yeah.
let him sit. You know, he's not disturbing. I mean, obviously he's eating loudly, sucking on the bones. Man, he wanted to make sure he got all that stuff out of the chicken. It was good chicken, but you know, if that's the way he's going to hear the truth of who God is, then I could care less at that point.
Yeah.
You know that he's there.
And I think that's what makes you different. Like I was even, I talked to Amber and other people that I know, and I'm like, no, Pastor James is different, right? Like I went
Oh,
to,
I am different.
he is,
I'm,
but like,
I'm weird. I don't know why anybody ever hangs out around me.
oh
But
my goodness. Well, I had gone to like what I mean, and it was probably before I met Amber. I had a friend who was going to church, and I went to the church with her. It was large. I mean, oh
yeah,
my gosh, there
yeah,
was so many people, so many things, and it almost felt like I don't know, like a show,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
it was just so perfect. Everything was lined up, but it was like there was no intimate
yeah.
connection with anyone, right?
Right.
And I feel like you are so willing to like talk to anybody, to help anyone understand, to have those one-on-one conversations. And you're not like pushy, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't come and talk to you and you're like, Julia, you have to get saved. You have to do this. Da, 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 da. Like it's not like that, right? It's like
Yeah.
I'll help
Just
you.
wait.
I'll teach you.
Just wait.
I'll teach you
Yeah.
what you want to know. And,
Yeah.
and I think that's one thing I really like about the church here is it's small and it's intimate and everyone is
Yeah.
willing to open that door to, kind of help you, navigate Christianity, right?
But
Like,
I think you bring up an interesting point because I do know a lot of unchurched that go to large churches, and I'm not. And when I define large church, understand this is kind of a misconception in the world today in the U.S. that you've got small churches and you got large churches. Well,
hmm
75% of churches are 60 people or less,
oh, okay.
right?
I did not know that.
You'll probably never know that because you'll never go to those.
Yeah.
So really we're 180 roughly people, 185 people here at this church, and we're considered large
Oh,
because
really?
very few will ever get to our size, you know. And then you got the big churches,
Yeah.
the ones that have that. And what ends up happening like so I started on a church of 1300. That was where I was on staff for the first time.
Wow. That is
4 services because we had parking issues,
okay.
and you didn't it was very hard to have any intimacy, any relationship. And what we'd find a lot of times is we'd have people come in and they came in to hide. They want to kind of come in
Okay.
and hear the great music and hear the great preaching and then leave and never truly connect. And so a lot of
I could be
those,
that person.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even here, I tried to do that, but
yeah.
it
Yeah,
didn't work.
it's hard to do here,
Yeah. No.
because we are a loving church, right? I want to know you,
Yeah.
and I think if I could speak anything to an unchurched individual, I would recommend you find a church under 200.
Yeah.
As scary as that is, and even though I say we have 185 people in this church, our average attendance is like 130. So even on a Sunday, we're only having 60 some odd percent, which is kind of the church norm in the church world today. And so it's a lot easier to have those conversations to know almost everybody or
Yeah.
know the vast majority. But in those larger churches, you're never going to be able to have this
Correct.
right
Yeah.
this moment.
And I feel like
You
that was
know,
such a disconnect for me, right? Like
yeah,
I was younger. I was definitely not in the mindset. I felt like then it was more like a checklist, right? Like
yeah,
I was like,
yeah,
all right, all my friends go to church, so here we go. Church
right,
Sunday, check.
right,
Go to lunch,
yeah,
check, right? And
yeah,
now it's like, you want more from that,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
You want to dig a little deeper. And so, yeah, so I feel like that's one big thing is trying to
yeah,
find the right fit for you, right?
yeah,
Like, because I mean, I know people that have gone to churches and they're like, it's not it. I've done the same thing,
yeah,
right? And sometimes you have to try again and
yeah,
try again. But
yeah,
I don't know. I guess a big thing for me is like, I even told Amber like I already want to help other people, right?
yeah,
Like I'm like, okay, I'm here, I'm trying, I'm
yeah,
learning. Like, what can I do to help other people like me
yeah,
that don't know, right?
right,
Like, so that's I think one of the reasons I was so excited to like come here, like, and
yeah,
I was so honored that you asked me to be on the podcast. And I was like, okay, let me make a list of questions here, a list of things that like other people
Yeah.
might feel the same way that I do about that kind of scares them from diving deeper, right?
Well, I think you bring up so many great points because if those individuals that are struggling to know that that's not abnormal, it is normal, and then also to be given permission to know that you probably are going to hit it.
Yeah.
You know, I know I'm the lead pastor here, so I'm supposed to say this, but I love this church. I absolutely do. I love the people here. I think they're great. But do all the people do the right thing all the time? No. Are you
No.
going to get backlash or are judge? You probably are at some point.
But I feel like
But
that's with everything, right?
but
Everything,
everywhere you
encounter
go,
that.
you get
So
judged at Walmart because you're dressed too nicely. Because you're not supposed to dress nice when you go to Walmart.
yeah,
Everybody knows I'm not a Walmart fan.
and neither
So,
am I.
right. But I think that's knowing that to start off with, but knowing that's not the label. It's like judging any group by a segment
Yeah.
of that I went to church and that lady said something to me, and so the church is bad. Well, no, the lady's bad.
Yeah. No.
To I think to understand that and to find a place and to find one of the things that you said, and I think that's so important, is finding a church where you have this opportunity.
Yeah.
I say it from the pulpit. I say it on Wednesdays. Any chance I get, right? If you have any questions, talk to me.
Yeah.
My door's open. I mean, I very rarely, when I'm in the office, ever shut my door. Why? Because I'm there for people. And so, in fact, I had one lady at one point, like, I've never been in here before. It's like coming to the principal's office. And I told her, I said, well, if you think you're coming to the principal,
Yeah.
then I've done a bad job,
Oh,
right? Because I'm not the principal. I'm that weird uncle. No. Right. I'm the guy that's supposed to help you, the career counselor, if anything, if you want to look at me at that in that mindset. And that's my hope. And so find a church, where you're at, where maybe it's not the lead pastor because it's, he doesn't have the opportunity. There's too much stuff going on,
yeah.
but maybe there's somebody in that church, in some capacity, some leadership capacity that can help you grow.
Yes. Exactly.
To find that and be willing to ask the questions, going to those other classes maybe,
Yes.
and being open and I know it's hard.
It is
It's
hard.
scary.
It is scary.
But
to
that's
be
why I
the-
always encourage you, like,
to be
keep
the only
asking.
person to ask that. Like,
Well, how many times have I looked around the room and nothing? I'm like, I look at their eyes like they're kind of glazed over.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know you don't understand what I just said.
Yeah.
But I don't know what you didn't understand about what I just said.
I mean, I know we kind of touched on this before, but I thought it was super important to talk about on the podcast. Was one of my biggest questions to you, which was like, one of the things I didn't understand was like, I would go and I would hear you preach, or on Wednesday nights I'd hear other people with their, testimonies or
Yeah.
talk, and they're like, God told me to tell you this, and I was like,
Right.
what do you mean he told? Like, he talked to you, he said that
Yep,
to you,
yep.
or like, I saw him, and I'm like, you saw him?
Yeah.
Like, what does he look like? And I do it literally gets me every time, and it's
Yeah.
like, no matter how much we talk about it, it is still so like far from me, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I know, like Amber, she was telling me, like, it's also how close you are in that relationship with him,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like, the closer you are to God, the more you can hear him and see him and talk
Yeah.
to him, right?
Yeah.
All of those things. And so, that is just still something that gets me every time. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, he's there, you see him, you hear him, like, how? And I think that's something that's so hard for any non-Christian to grasp.
Right.
I know, is like,
Yeah.
how do you believe
Yeah.
in something that you can't touch, you can't feel, you can't see, you can't hear,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's tough.
Yes, it is, and there's always the ways we Christians try to teach people, like, what's like the wind. You could see the effect of the wind and you can feel it, but you don't really know the origins. You don't know, right?
Yeah.
That's great, but it doesn't. It misses it. It misses the depth of that, because again, you do see the effects of the wind.
Yeah.
I can see that flag is flapping, so I know that there's wind.
Yeah.
With God, a lot of times you're like, well, what's the effect, right? Where
Yeah.
do I see that? And like you're talking about, it's so funny to me, is that, I heard from God or I saw God and what we had talked about that night, is again, it's Christianese. It's that
Yep.
language because more than likely, I wage money on it. I don't bet, but that 99% chance that they've never heard God's voice. Yeah, they've never seen God.
Yeah.
You know, um, but there's let me say an impression, a feeling, a sense. In fact, I just had one the other night. I was at dinner
Uh-huh.
by myself, and I just felt impressed that I needed to text this guy and just kind of encourage him,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
know. And then he responded like within 5 minutes, and like, you have no idea how much I needed to hear that right
See,
now.
that is
You know,
so crazy to me. Like I can think of so many times that I've had like, like recently, my son, he had to start speech therapy, right?
yeah,
And they were using all these big words, all this big terminology, and I was so scared, right? Like I
yeah,
was crying and I was upset, and I'm like, God, it took me so long to have my son.
right,
Like I struggled, to get pregnant to have him, and
okay,
he's here. And now this, like, like why couldn't he just be perfect,
yeah,
And
yeah,
so I wrestled with that a lot, right? Like any mom, any parent, you want your kids to be okay, right? Like we don't
yeah,
ever want anything to be wrong with them.
yeah,
And so I was really going through it. And Amber had texted me and she's like, I think you should come. It was a Thursday night. She's like, I
yeah,
think you should come. We started the book, and I just think, and I got here and it was like everything that I needed to hear was said.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it was just like, how?
uh-huh,
How did she know? Like,
yeah,
what is this in it? She's like, it's God. Like, I
yeah,
know you think it's a coincidence. I
right,
know, but it is. Like, he's trying to get to you.
yeah, yeah,
So I think in those instances, I see that, right? Like, you get that feeling, that
yeah,
intuition, but it's
yeah,
still like, what do you mean? Like,
yeah,
he said that to you. He told you to tell me that. Are
yeah,
you sure?
yeah. And that's
So
it. And so, talking to him, I'm like, well, I just felt like, and that's what I text back. I just felt like God told me this because I believe that, and this is one of my things I say all the time. God's
mhm.
always talking. We're just not listening, right? And so I look at those opportunities as God speaking to me. So again, I didn't hear an audible voice.
Yeah.
It just, without thinking about this individual, I'm just eating and
Yeah.
enjoying my pancake breakfast dinner thing I was having. It was really cool. It was like
Pancake for dinner?
pancakes,
What
yeah,
is that?
and like sausage and bacon and eggs, and it was like the
Oh,
most
wow.
unhealthy thing you'd want, but it was really good. So I'm enjoying that,
Yeah.
waiting to pick my wife up from the airport, and he popped in,
Uh-huh.
this guy, and then so I texted. So what we equate as Christians, we're like, well, that's God,
Yeah.
because why would I think about him at that moment? There was nothing that I was on my phone. In fact, if anything, I was playing Monopoly Go. Like, just it's one of those things
Just alone at
I
dinner, just
I like to
hanging out.
just that was it, right? And you look at that, and so then as a Christian, I equate that and say, well, that God spoke to me, you know.
Okay.
And
That makes sense.
as a non-Christian, you're like, well, what did he sound like?
No, literally.
What,
But that's what I
right?
that's
You
how I
you
took
you
it.
saw God, and I think like people that say that they saw God, they talk about these visions and
Mhm.
and I think I've shared this with you. I've had visions as well, and they're images, and
Mhm.
but you probably have had images as well. You have times and places and things,
Yeah.
but sometimes in those moments of where prayer or moments of just talking, I'm not talking about anything where I'm prophetically, I'm seeing the end of the world, those kind of things.
Yeah.
But I think I shared with one. I was actually on a Civil War battlefield, and just saw an image of people fighting. One side's fighting, the other side is kind of turn around and their back is to the battle.
Yeah.
And I saw that at that moment. I felt like then God, like I'm saying again, right?
Yeah.
Then God began to explain to me what He was showing me.
Gotcha. That makes
And
sense.
so I saw God. I didn't see God.
Yeah.
You know, but again, that's the terminology, and that's how we like to talk about it.
Yeah. Of course.
Because to us it makes sense,
Yeah.
but again, to a non-Christian, they're like, "Well, you hear God?"
And it is.
Um, you need to go see a doctor.
No, literally.
There's a
Yeah.
problem with you. You're seeing visions. That they say that you might have a tumor. Like a brain tumor.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
there's a problem, and I think those questions are so great to ask because if you've never experienced it, or even when you have it a couple times, it takes a while to really understand what we mean, or what I mean by God is always talking. We're just not
Mhm.
listening. I know a lot of Christians that don't understand what I'm saying. They're like, "Oh yeah, amen, yeah, hallelujah, that's
Yeah.
great," but they don't know what I'm talking about. Because what I'm talking about is that not only that one story, but being out on cleaning up garbage, cleaning my garage, fixing a roof leak one time. These moments where some clarity of thought
Yeah.
comes in, some I'm picking up garbage and thinking that makes me think of this other thing, which kind of helps me go, okay, oh yeah, this was what God means by this in the word, or be able to pull things together. It's like we'll circle all the way back to C.S. Lewis and the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That by utilizing that analogy, he's able to pull the truth of what the gospel is trying to say
Yeah.
into a different world, right? So yeah, God is always speaking. The scripture says, the Bible talks about that all creation glorifies, all creation proclaims who God is.
Mhm.
So therefore, I should be looking, and when I see something, that I see God in that moment. In fact, I remember we were hiking in Utah, and I saw this tree. If you've never been out in Utah, it's
Never.
not beautiful, but it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's not that green, gorgeous look, right? It's desert, it's rocks.
Yeah.
But we were up on this one mountain. We were doing rappelling that day, and there was this tree on the side.
My hands are sweaty. I don't like heights. It's like, oh.
You wouldn't have liked the one we first
Woo.
rappel we did. It was 185 feet. It was
Yeah.
crazy.
No.
But so we're coming down, and all of a sudden you see this tree, and it's growing,
Uh-huh.
and almost all of its roots are outside the rock, but there's just one root that goes into the rock. And I remember
Oh,
looking
wow.
at and going, well, look at, kind of like that idea, like, man, God can help me grow anywhere. God
Yeah.
can, as long as I have one root,
Mhm.
one solid connection. That's God speaking in that moment to kind of remind me of,
Wow. I
it's
like how you took that.
it's not the desert. The
Yeah.
desert doesn't kill you at all times.
Yeah.
You can actually grow in those hard times,
Yeah.
right? So I believe God's speaking to us,
Yeah.
and so I think as an unchurched individual, can you hear us say that and like, oh wow, okay, there's something wrong with
Crazy.
them.
No.
But the truth is, it's just we begin to look at things differently, or
Yeah.
should, and go, okay, if it's true that all creation is proclaiming God's glory, then what is it telling us in those moments?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Oh, I love that. Yeah, look at you. You're just taking all the things away. I'm like, I feel like I would have looked at
She
that and
she knows
not.
everything. Tomorrow she's going to be preaching.
I
You
know.
you ready for your sermon on Sunday? Yeah.
I feel like I heard someone tell me something like that before, that like they had they may have been like not a lead pastor, but like
Yeah.
a junior pastor, something,
Yeah.
I'm not sure terminology. And like they had asked him to go up and preach or something, and he was like, I didn't even know what to say, but then when I
Yeah.
got up there, just
It
like
all it
it
all
all just
yeah.
came out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's nice. But the other thing I didn't get to tell you was, we talked on Wednesday. We talked about, okay, here we go, the hearing, the seeing
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
God. Well, the other thing that always got me was like tongues, right? People
Oh
speaking
yeah.
in tongues. And I was telling Pastor James, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, every time this happens, I'm like, I get so awkward, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I don't really know it, that kind of thing. Well, the very next day, on Thursday, it happened again. We're
Yeah.
sitting there and they just start talking in tongues, and I'm like, what is happening? And I like
Yeah.
looked at Amber and I'm like, here we go again. I just told Pastor, and then Amber's mom Brenda, she was like, well, maybe God wanted you to hear that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
try not to think of it as like, oh my gosh, it's so weird, it's so scary, but more like, wow, how cool am I
Yeah.
in the presence of God speaking to us,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That I feel like that's another thing that kind of gets us non-Christians, like when we
Yeah.
go to church, is hearing someone speak in tongues. And
Yeah.
it's like, what is wrong? Like, I already thought you were crazy because you think you can hear him and see him,
Yeah.
and now
Now we
you're,
know you're crazy because you're speaking.
yeah,
Yeah. And that. So I mean, I'm trying to figure out how to answer this question, or at least get us somewhere. because I am Pentecostal.
Yeah.
What Pentecostal means is that we believe that in Acts chapter 2, at what they call the day of Pentecost,
Uh-huh.
the Holy Spirit, what they call the Holy Spirit baptism, and I say we Pentecostals believe that. Every denomination believes that. Every
Okay.
Catholics, Protestant, all these other Christian churches, they
Mhm.
all believe the same thing. Acts chapter 2 was real. The baptism of the Holy Spirit was real. They spoke in tongues as what the Spirit gave utterance. Right,
Yeah.
the Spirit spoke through them, and they went out, and all these people heard them speaking in their own language. It's kind of a
Okay.
really cool. So
Yeah.
it'd be like all of a sudden I go to Brazil.
Yeah.
I don't know Portuguese, and I begin to speak in a tongue, but they all hear it in Portuguese.
Oh
Right?
wow.
But
Yeah. Okay. That's
big
yeah.
term, glossolalia, right? It's glossolalia, right? So there's your term of the day.
Okay.
And so that's what happened that day. Okay, and then from that moment on, the book of Acts, is which we're studying on Wednesday nights. What we see are miracles that happen. People being raised from the dead, blind seeing, the things
Yeah.
of Jesus that we see, prophecy, words of wisdom, all these gifts, and
Yeah.
they're listed in the New Testament. What happened? I'm trying not to get too historical, but
I know I brought up the wrong question.
no, it's a great question. But at some point in history,
Uh-huh.
some denominations, most denominations, believe that that power of the baptism of the Holy Spirit, some call the spirit fire baptism,
Mhm.
ceased. Right, was no longer necessary.
Okay.
Okay, and so it wasn't until the 17th, 18th century that you begin to see the Spirit baptism reemerge within churches, and then the technically 20th century, early 1900s, late 1800s, you have the birth of the Pentecostal church,
Okay.
which believes that the gift of the Holy Spirit, the baptism of the Holy Spirit, never ceased. So that's one of the things so some of you are like, have no idea what we're talking about tongues at this point, because you've been to a Baptist church or a
Yeah.
Protestant or a Methodist or a Lutheran, and you've never heard this. What she's talking about is it almost sounds like babble to most
It
people,
does. Like
right?
a baby
It's like
learning to
you're like
talk.
going, I wish I had one of those interpretation things, right? So I can figure out what they're
Yeah.
saying. But what the New Testament talks about is the gift of tongues and then the interpretation of tongues. So most often you have someone who gives what we call a word in tongue, right?
Mhm.
And then somebody comes behind them and interprets and brings the English version and begins to say what we feel like God has said at that moment. And it is weird.
Yeah.
It is
It's
absolutely
good.
weird. It's abused in some churches.
Okay.
And what I mean by abuse is people just do it. It's becomes an emotional kind of response.
Oh.
Right, if that makes any sense, right? So I get excited, and I just erupt in it.
Yeah.
And so it's such a tough conversation because again, if you are not Pentecostal, you just think we're weird off the bat, because we still believe in the power and the problem, in fact, this month in March, I'm going to hit all of this
I
on
know
my
you told me
sermons. I'm
that.
really
Like
excited about it.
Sunday,
I'm going to break some people's brains, because we abuse the tongues, we abuse the interpretation of tongues,
yeah.
and we forget about all the other gifts that are there that are available for us. And so I think as those of you that are going to Pentecostal church, especially in unchurched,
Mhm.
right? Yes, it is weird.
Yeah.
It's foreign. It's something that I think again sometimes has been abused. But the heart of it is so powerful. And one of the things that I'm so blessed here at this church is that every time that we've had, like during the service,
Mhm.
a tongue and then again an interpretation,
Yeah.
and you've been here for those that the interpretation lines up with the sermon, and so
Yeah.
which is the crazy part because and what I mean by that is like they don't know what my sermon is,
Yeah.
they don't know what I'm going to talk about, and yet this person says, I believe God's saying this, and I look at my notes and I'm like, that's exactly what I'm about to say, you
Yeah.
know, because normally it happens during worship. It
Yes.
happens before I begin to preach, so it's not even like they have an idea, and so like where I'm going to go, so they can just fill in the blank,
Yeah.
you know. And so, if you are at a church and you experience this tongues, pay attention to the interpretation.
Yeah.
You know, some people, and this is kind of an easy way to explain it. Some people are really nervous about giving a word from God, right?
Mhm.
That they might feel something, and so they're again, like that. Hey, call this guy, text this guy.
Yeah.
Those, they might feel something, feel like I'm supposed to say something, but they don't want to say it out loud, and so they'll give it tongues, right? Because it's a little easier. Because
Oh,
does that make
okay.
sense?
Yeah, that does
Like
make sense.
I can just
Okay.
say this thing, and then all the pressure is now on the person that's going to
And interpret
interpret,
it.
and it better be
Yeah.
right, and so I think sometimes that you have a little bit more of that because because of that uncomfort of like I don't want to say the wrong thing,
Yeah.
you know.
I feel like I've seen that, like, even I talk about Amber all the
Yeah.
time, but that's who I spend most of my time with. But she there's been times where she's like, "Listen, like, I'm gonna say something to you, but like like God has put this on my heart to say it, right?"
Yeah.
It's even, I mean, we're best friends. I mean,
Right.
we've known each other forever, and it's like she still gets nervous
Nervous.
and
Yeah.
uncomfortable
Yeah.
to say those things to me or
Yeah.
to encourage me. Like, I don't know what you had been preaching about. I don't
Yeah.
remember, but she was like, I think you need to go up there. Like, God is
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
go up there. And I'm like, are you gonna come? Like, and so like, it
Will,
also,
will you protect me?
no, really though. Like,
Yeah.
it just, and I feel like those are all just things that you kind of learn, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like I'm more comfortable now if someone was like, hey, God put this on my heart. I need to say this to you. I'm not like so new and uncomfortable. I'm like, what do
Yeah.
you mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, okay, like I'll listen and take it in. But it's
But you've
usually almost,
experienced the good part of it, like
yeah. I'm
where
like, wait,
again
there's bad part? What do you
people.
mean?
Well, it's just that people have been right.
Yeah.
Like I know you don't know my family,
Yeah.
and you're talking to me, and I know you don't know what I'm going
Yeah.
through. Amber's not talked to you
Yeah.
before, those kind of moments, like so I think as you begin to experience those, yeah, it makes it a little bit easier,
Yeah.
you
It
know,
does.
because then you're like, okay, well, it worked the last time, they were right on,
Yeah.
because we're not talking about fortune telling, that concept where people are just reading into things,
Yeah.
like
And that was the crazy part, like I was like, and it's just funny, like I had sent, Jessica and like an audio, and she was like,
yeah,
I'm at church, like
yeah,
working, she
yeah,
was here working. She's like, I'll listen to this when I leave. And
yeah,
like, so the audio's there, and like you can see that she hasn't listened to it. And then when I got here
yeah,
and they came up and they're like, God told me to say this to you. I was like, okay, well, that's crazy
yeah,
because, I know Jessica didn't listen to the audio here. I know you didn't talk to Amber. So it's like,
yeah,
and that's when I went home and told my husband, I'm like, is this a coincidence, right? Like, how
yeah,
did she know all of these
yeah,
things? And he's like, no, Julia, like, that's
yeah,
God, that's what it is. And
yeah,
I'm like, maybe we don't, and I guess I wouldn't say like we don't want to believe that, but
yeah,
like, when you're a non-Christian, it's like, what do you mean it's God? Like,
right,
no, it just happened to line up that way,
yeah,
right? But now that I'm starting to become more familiar,
yeah,
it's like, oh no, that's
yeah,
God. Like,
yeah.
he's giving you that, I am here. I am listening. I know what you're going through and I hear your questions,
Yeah.
like, cuz I'm learning to talk to God, right?
Right.
Like people tell you like, okay, talk to
And thank
God,
you for
pray.
saying that, because it's too often people are like, I'm praying. No,
Yeah,
no,
not
no.
really.
It's a talking prayer for most people is like, now I lay me down to sleep. That kind of,
I'm like, I don't even know those prayers. I mean,
that kind of
right,
stuff,
yeah.
right? Where God desires to communicate with us, to talk with us.
Yeah.
I love to tell a story of when I was in a junior high. I'd walk to youth group,
Uh-huh.
and it was about a mile from my house, and I'd walk home at night, and kind of in scary areas, and I would talk out loud with God. But and what I mean by talk, I would talk like, hey, did you see that pretty girl? what do you think about her, God?
Oh,
You
that's
know,
amazing though,
like,
right?
how's your day, God? Like I just had this idea that God was actually interested in my day, and so I should be interested in His day.
So I feel
You
like
know,
that's how I talk to him though. Like I don't
yeah,
really know. I mean, like I know there was like a Wednesday night I'd come and you guys had talked about like the right way to pray,
yeah,
right? Like there's yeah. So like I was still very,
yeah,
very new, right? So I probably don't pray right. Like I mean, I realized on a Thursday night, like Amber and I were here, and they're like, you shouldn't pray to God to change people. That's like witchcraft. And I was like,
yeah,
I've been here committing witchcraft for I don't know how long, right? Like I'm like, because
yeah.
I don't really know.
Let me stop you there. Context, guys. You got to don't
Yeah,
start blowing
yeah,
this
no,
thing
no,
up.
sorry.
That's not what they were saying, nor what they fully meant. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like we did afterwards, kind of like
yeah,
ask more to contacts. It's not literally that, right?
yeah,
But it's just
right,
that God doesn't have the will to just change
yeah,
you, right? Like you
right,
gotta want to
right.
be changed.
Free,
Yeah.
free will, and
Yes.
that's a whole
Yeah.
nother
Yeah. That's a whole
concept.
other
I
thing.
think
I'm
we
getting
I
too into it
I
now.
think we covered free will in one of the other podcasts and episode or season one. So
But I'm like I was going somewhere with that, and
yeah,
I kind of forget. But it's just that I feel like I just talk,
so,
right? Like
yeah,
I'm like, okay, God, they say you're here, you're listening, so
yeah,
let's have the conversation, right? So
right,
like, and I kind of ask him those same questions I kind of asked
yeah,
you, like, okay, well, you're here, so
yeah.
like, what do you mean, like like what I'm going through, you're
Yeah.
here, and I just kind of talk and hope that
That's
like
the
you're
perfect prayer.
listening, right?
That really is the perfect prayer. I wish more would get that because we get the what we call the these, the thous, the those. It's the old King James version language,
And
you
that's that
know.
Bible verse, and I'm like,
Right.
what?
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, I think getting past the legalism, and I'll kind of end with that is such a big part because those of us in Christianity, too many have been raised in legalism or
Yeah.
follow the law.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a specific law out there, but what we have to get to is a love relationship with God,
Yeah.
and therefore then we love neighbors as well as ourselves. Is what the command, what we're told.
Yeah.
That's the earmark of who we are. But if we think through that and to kind of end it here, if I love God, if I truly love God, right? Therefore, I'm going to do things naturally that please Him. I'm going to do things
Yeah.
naturally, like if maybe you're like me, didn't have a good relationship with your dad, right?
Yeah.
I didn't even know him until I was much older. But for those of you that did, you kind of understand this. Or my mom, right? I love my mom, and so growing up, I would do things that would please her, and that when I did things that didn't make her happy, right? I had remorse. You
Yeah.
know,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
hated to see my mom cry,
Yeah.
right?
That makes
If it
sense.
was something I did specifically,
Yeah.
that was the worst thing. But I loved it when my mom was happy.
Mhm.
So in our relationship with God, that should be the same thing. So
Good
all of
way
a
to look
sudden
at
you
it.
you you get rid of the rules and go, what pleases God's heart?
Yeah.
Well, what pleases His heart? Me spending time with Him, me thinking about Him, me talking with Him. I think God pleases God's heart because we're
Yeah.
talking about Him. You know, in that kind of and I think of Him as a father, then which we're told we're supposed to, then I think about what would make God happy.
Yeah.
And therefore I begin to do things that make God happy. I don't follow a list of rules any longer, right? You see the twist
Yeah.
there, and I think too often we've got to, well, hey, I can't wear jeans with holes in them because that's wrong,
Yeah.
you know. And then we go, okay, what does God think about it? Oh, he could care less, you know. But what I don't do is I don't wear a mini skirt that shows my hoo ha, right?
Well, yeah.
You know, because
But we know
because
more. Like that's not right anyway.
right,
Right.
right.
Like.
But because dad would not approve of that,
Yeah. That's
I've
true.
got
I
two
didn't even think
daughters
of it.
and they're gonna walk out with showing any of the three B's, then it's like, nope, you go back in your room, you change,
I love that the 3 Bs.
So, I think that's it. And so I just really encourage the unchurched, right?
Yeah.
That for those of you that are trying to go battle through this and find a body, find a church, find a group of individuals that are willing to sit down and talk with you
I
and
agree. Yeah.
be willing to ask the questions. And if you're at a church where you ask a question and you're not either not getting answers or they're just condemning you, find another body. I'll just say
Yes.
find another church. But on the flip side, let me talk to the church people. Right? We have to do a better job. We've got to love those individuals that come in, and I think I shared this with you. Unfortunately, what we do with the unchurched is we assume a foundation, we build walls, we build roofs, we try to build the
Yeah.
structure, and so for those of us in church, right, when we find it, people don't assume they know David and Goliath. Make sure that you're building a foundation and allow them to talk to you about things, and don't just laugh at them because they don't understand your language, because maybe you don't understand your language as well as you think you do. So thank you so much. Will you come back? Will you do
Oh
another
my
one?
gosh, I'll come anytime.
Okay,
Yeah,
start writing down some other
definitely.
questions. I think this is helpful.
Yeah.
Just as we go through, and hey, like us, comment. If you have any suggestions on even topics that you want us to cover, please let me know. Just really appreciate the chance to just share what God is doing. Slice of Life is all about that organic conversation to just discuss what's going on. So we'll see you in the next episode.